Hey guys, welcome to this session by Intellipaat. Kubernetes is such a big name in today's world of technology, right? When you think about it, it is rare that you find a company who does not make use of this open source orchestration service that's out there. And in fact, with the rise of machine learning and with powerful computing around us, Kubeflow is something that's gaining a lot of momentum, and we think that you guys should know about it. So keeping that in mind, we here at Intellipaat have come up with this Kubeflow video where we'll be discussing a lot of things about it. But then guys, before we begin with the session, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell icon so that you'll never miss any updates from us. And now, coming to the agenda of the session, we'll start out by taking a quick understanding to know what Kubeflow is. After that, we can check out who built Kubeflow and of course how Kubeflow can be used by us and how it helps us basically. After this, we can check out the Kubernetes part of Kubeflow, and in fact, Kubeflow actually gets its name from Kubernetes, so we can check out that in detail as well. And of course, whenever we talk about Kubeflow, we have to talk about machine learning, so we're gonna check out the bridge that gaps, Kubernetes, Kubeflow, and of course machine learning. And at the end of the day, we can check out, what is the complexity that we talk about whenever we think about providing solutions with machine learning, and of course, we can discuss the launch of Kubeflow as well. And at the end of the session, we'll be talking about the advantages of making use of Kubeflow and a lot more. Well, guys, without further ado, let's start the class.
So let's start this Kubeflow video by taking a quick look at some facts that you might or might not know. See, for example, did you know that Kubernetes has a huge community presence online just because it's open source, it's extremely powerful to use, and it's pretty easy to go about working with it as well, right? So one, it's open source. Two, it has a very supportive and a huge community to go with that as well. And then, when you think about the Kubernetes logo, right, it is always the ship, it's the anchor, and it consists of 7 spokes. Well, there is a meaning for that, and the 7 spokes in the logo actually refer to the project's original name. Before it was called Kubernetes, it was called as the Project 7 of 9, and that's how it's got the 7 spokes in the logo. And then, when we think about anything open source, right, there's a lot of companies that come into collaboration to see if they can pitch out and come with a common solution. And here in this case, that was the same too, because Red Hat actually worked with Google to go on to develop Kubernetes even before it was actually officially announced or launched as well. So in that particular case, Kubeflow or Kubernetes in general being open source adds a lot of value to the community and of course to the people who are willing to use the technology as well. Now, coming to the introduction to Kubeflow. Well, what is Kubeflow, right? See, when you think about it, you have tools such as Adobe Photoshop for photographers out there, people who want to edit photos and all that. And then when we're talking about architecture and civil engineers, these guys have the AutoCAD tool, right? Now, what do machine learning engineers have when we're talking about using a machine learning pipeline which is hosted in a clustered architecture? Well, that tool itself, the entire platform is Kubeflow. So when we talk about what Kubeflow exactly is, you have to understand that it is one of these very popular open source platforms right now that will help us make use of setting up machine learning pipelines where we can run very complicated, very complex programs and have it run on Kubernetes clusters very easily as well. So by doing this, we can make use of the computation power, the resources, and a lot of other things, a lot of dependencies from multiple machines in a cluster at a time. And this can exponentially speed up a lot of complex things. And of course, whenever you talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, or deep learning, you already know that it takes a lot of memory, it takes a lot of processing power, and it's going to take more than this, it's going to take a lot of time to go on to provide a solution. Right now, think about, you're on a website, you have a chatbot that you're talking with, right? Or it's your favorite food delivery service and there's a chatbot on the other side and you're very hungry, you're asking where the order is and all of that, right? So in that case, if you send a message across to the chatbot, and if the chatbot takes 3 or 4 minutes to just put out one single reply with, like, a basic reply, it doesn't make sense. So you need that kind of a speed. And it's not just you asking where your food order is. There's probably thousands of people who are doing that at that very second as well, right? So it has to cater to all of these people at once. Now, when you consider of a situation like that, when you're thinking about the practical usability and the possibility of how overloaded a machine learning model's implementation can get, in that particular case, I believe kubeflow is definitely something that helps a lot. Especially we're talking about Kubernetes, right? So Kubernetes is one of those tools that is extremely easy to work with. It's very, very powerful, right? So do not be carried away by the fact that it's easy to use, just that it is extremely powerful and it can achieve a lot of things with you doing a lot less. Now, why do I say this, right? See, what is Kubernetes first of all? Kubernetes is one of these tools where we can, create applications, deploy them, and operate them in a microservice architecture, right? So, but then how do we go on to do this? Like, we know what it is, but how do we go on to do this? So, what we try to do is we have a couple of hosts where we make use of the computation power of the hosts, but here we create an abstraction layer on the top, so we are in continuous touch and control with all of these hosts that we have. And you can work with it. You can deploy your applications very, very easily without you having to do many things, as I just mentioned, right? So when you think about Kubernetes, it's going to give you an ocean worth of control when it comes to deploying your applications and when it comes to continuous delivery as well. So in that particular case, it can get a little complex for beginners to get started with Kubernetes. But then worry not, with a good certification program, with good training, you guys can become experts in DevOps and of course in Kubernetes as well. So after understanding what Kubernetes is, how it works, and of course why we have to prefer Kubernetes, you really have to check out how Kubeflow came into the picture, right? See, so we're talking about machine learning and its orchestration on the Kubernetes platform, but then who are the people who brought this into existence? Well, to answer that question, you have really four big names you have to talk about. One is Google. Of course, Google is the key player in Kubernetes and everything that has to do with it. We have Cisco, we have people of IBM, and of course we have the experts at Red Hat as well. So these four guys, it's not just four people from this company, it's probably hundreds of people from each of these companies. They came together, they realized that they want to make use of the power of operations to make sure the machine learning pipeline is simplified, right? A developer should really not break his or her head about deploying the application. Their job is to make sure they solve the problem using code, and they write it and they're done. Now, to go on and take it into a production environment, you need the operating side, right? This is why we require DevOps. DevOps actually bridges the gap in between development and operations. So the people at development can worry about development. The people at operations can worry about, actually going on and taking all of these code and scaling it to production pipeline. And of course, you have DevOps engineers and developers and architects who have the capability to bridge these gap in between as well. So with this, you might have a question that states, how will Kubeflow help in today's world, right? See, whenever we talk about Kubeflow, the main thing you have to talk about is its performance, is its ability to work with machine learning pipeline, to host it, and of course to give you that kind of a power of making use of machine learning and orchestrating it very easily at the end of the day. So what Kubeflow actually does is it'll help you build machine learning models. You're going to get all the tools, the frameworks, and everything, as we're going to check out in the components in the next couple of slides. So you're gonna have everything foundational enough where you can get started working with the top machine learning frameworks out there, and you can in fact start working with machine learning and get it across ready to production as well. So you can do all of that just with the help of Kubeflow. And then it's not always about just building your model, right? See, building your model is one thing, but the second thing is to see how well the model actually performs. Now, to do all of that, you're going to require certain tools, you're going to require certain skills, and of course, you're going to have a platform that will support model testing too, right? So with Kubeflow, yes, you get features where you can help yourself and of course help the product development team in a way where you can actually analyze the model performance in depth to see where the model where the machine learning model is going wrong, what it's doing right, why it is doing the things it's in the way it's doing, and a lot of these things. So the primary aspects of using Kubeflow is to build machine learning models and of course to analyze to see whatever you have built is either working fine or not. And then talking in terms of in the depth of machine learning, there's so many things that are involved, right? See, with kubeflow you can actually tune out hyperparameters, you can fine tune the model, you can make sure your model is extremely accurate and that it achieves the solution in the best way possible. In terms of time, in terms of efficiency, in terms of computing power, all of these come at a price whenever you're in a production environment, right? So you have to count for all of these. And if there is one problem, right, you can probably have 3 or 4 ways a machine learning model can solve that problem. Now it is your job to make use of the analysis and to make sure you find the top way to go on to actually solve the problem using that. That's where tuning comes into the picture, and with kubeflow you can do just that. And then when we talk about version controlling, right, see, in a production environment especially, right, in an official environment where you're working with a team, where you're working on building a product, it's not like you wrote a piece of code and that was the end of it until you close out sales or close down your company, right? So you will have version 1, version 1.1, 1.2, version 2, version 3, version 4. So you're going to have a lot of versions that will be coming out, and it's not just literally these versions being pushed out to production. It's just that you will probably have 100 people behind you who's working on the same piece of code. They're trying to achieve something, a part of the code that you might be working on, a part of the entire project that you might be working on, and everyone is trying to achieve their own subtasks to achieve the goal. Now, to keep a track of all of the changes that gets made in the code, to keep a track of who did what and what changes it had on the production pipeline, be the development pipeline or the production pipeline, and to track all of this actively, to roll back if there's any mistake, to update it to the latest versions, whatever it is, right? Version controlling is important, and kubeflow is going to help you guys in a way where the use of version control is actually very foundational to the use of the tool itself. And then, as I told you, right, the next set of points we really have to talk about is your ability to control the computing power that you require for your model. Now, sometimes there is a very good chance that you might be running a very simple classifier, right? It can be a binary classifier, or it can be, a very simple linear regression model, or whatever it is that might not require a lot of compute power. In that case, if you have, if you have, and in that case, if you have a cluster which really does not have the latest, or the fastest machines, well, yes, definitely you can get away with that. But what if you have extremely powerful machines and you're still using very simple programs out there, right? Of course, it doesn't hurt. But at the end of the day, if you have the ability to dial down the computing power or dial it up and throttle it out as and when you require, depending on the complexity of the machine learning model, well, that's going to save you a lot of time, money, and effort, because there will be no bottlenecks that get created in case if the demand is more than the supply, right? For that particular case, kubeflow is definitely helpful in controlling computing power. And then the next important thing we have to talk about is how we can take model prototypes into production. See, whenever you go on to develop and design a machine learning model, and if you guys are from a machine learning background, I'm sure you guys will relate to what I'm saying now. You will write a piece of code that will achieve almost, let's say, 80% of the task that needs to be done, and you call it a prototype. And now this prototype can go through multiple stages of being redone, being polished, and everything else to take it and make it production ready, right? So you have a piece of code that works, but then at the end goal, we want a product that works. So to take this piece of code into production and to make sure it's being implemented actively, be it on a website, be it a chatbot, or wherever it's required, right? So to do that, to bridge the gap between taking it from prototyping to production, kubeflow definitely helps here too. So the next thing that you guys might be curious about at this point of time in this kubeflow tutorial is the name itself, right? See, kubeflow comes from Kubernetes itself, but then what are we talking about? What is the connection to Kubernetes out here? And of course, whenever we're talking about kubeflow, right, Kubernetes is the basic foundation on which it works. So you really have to know Kubernetes to work with kubeflow. You really do not have to know Kubernetes in complete depth to be a machine learning programming person who's using Kubernetes. But at the end of the day, it'll always pay well if you are a kubeflow developer that you know Kubernetes and machine learning well. Now, coming to the actual talk about how the name came about, what does the name mean, right? Let's consider two things here. On the left side, we have cube. On the right side, we have flow. Now, What we're trying to signify with the name cube here is that it runs these machine learning models run on Kubernetes clusters, right? It's this orchestration platform that we make use of. We have multiple clusters, we have multiple devices in each cluster that we can use to run our machine learning programs on. In that particular case, we're using Kubernetes, hence the name cube. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to train multiple machine learning models across a lot of computers, as I told you, to leverage their speed, leverage their compute power, leverage their resources, and a lot more. Now, why would you want to do this? It's pretty simple, and I'm sure you already know the answer to it right now, because we want to exponentially speed up the execution. Now, if you have one computer that can run a machine learning model and it's going to take maybe 5 hours to train, but now you have a very powerful Kubernetes cluster that can do very similar tasks probably in 1 hour, which would you pick? 1 hour or 5 hours? Well, 1 hour, right? Similarly, now this 4 hours that you saved probably for your pet project is it's simple, it's okay. But then if you save 4 hours in a production environment, you're saving a ton loads of time in a way where it'll either make or break your business in many of these cases. So it's very important to speed up execution and keep it as fast as possible. So now coming to talk about the flow part of it. See, with the flow part, what we're trying to understand here is whenever we say flow, it's basically a short for workflow, because we're trying to signal how the model should work, its training life cycle, testing life cycle, and all of that from its start, right? So from the ingestion of data all the way till we have results and we verify that the results work correct. This workflow scheduling is very important, and the flow part of Kubeflow talks about that. As I just mentioned, it helps in the complete machine learning lifecycle completion and working. And of course, what this does is, at the end of the day, the developer only has to sit and work on the machine learning code and not break his or her head about how they have to scale it into production and all of that. So this means it's effective and efficient development that's going to save a lot of time and of course a lot of money for the organization as well. So to do all of this, right, so what are some of the components of Kubeflow that will help us do all this? There are many components in Kubeflow depending on your level of expertise, depending on your level of requirement. But then the four most common things that you will use in Kubeflow is pretty simple. You have the central dashboard, you have metadata, you have Jupyter notebooks, and you have the machine learning frameworks that you will actually use to train the model. So let's check out each of these for a second. Now, whenever you talk about a central dashboard, well, this is how a Kubeflow dashboard will look like. However, this is a very old screenshot from the build version 0.7. We're going to talk about the latest version in a couple of slides as well. But then, as you can see, right, so you have a lot of notebooks here. You have a couple of documentation things that will help you get started with it. You have a lot of shortcuts where you can create a new notebook server. You can view the pipeline. You can see what's running. You can check out the activities. You can do a lot of things at the click of a mouse button. So having this kind of a user interface and a very easy and a nice to use user experience, right? This is what drives the success of Kubeflow in my opinion, because at the end of the day, if you have to look at code all the time to think about operations, leave development. Of course, for development you're going to need code. Now for operations, if you have to keep doing this, it's a major headache, right? So that headache is completely solved by making use of a very elegant, very concise, very pithy dashboard in the case of Kubeflow with this. And the second thing is, whenever you're working with machine learning, there's going to be a lot of data that gets generated even before you run the model, and of course a lot of data that gets generated into information after you've run the model. So there is data that actually is used to help understand what the all the components mean and all the data mean, and that data is metadata basically describes data. Now in a machine learning scenario, you will have a lot of lot of data, such as how many executions were conducted, what was the epoch times in each of these runs, how many training sessions you had, and there's a lot of things whenever we just talk about execution as well. So considering the data just that gets generated out of execution is large, and then of course you'll have the model data, you'll have input output components where of course if you have a model, it means it has a data set. You have to describe the data set. The data set has to be understood by the machine learning model. So all of these individual files that we talk about will have sub dependencies among them, right? There are many files that's required to run a machine learning model. There's many objects that you'll have to consider in terms of input output components. You have data sets, you have the actual model training files, post training files, and there's so many files that you have to talk about. In the case of Kubeflow, right? So this is one important component that Kubeflow provides, where you can simply analyze all of this, manage all of this, and of course at the end of the day use it to see what your model is doing as well. So you have something to describe what your model is doing, and that is metadata. And the third thing that we'll have to talk about is the Jupyter notebooks. See, whenever you're writing a program in Python or in a notebook online, it's a good chance it's a Jupyter notebook, right? Now, in the case of Kubernetes, where you're running a Jupyter notebook across a server, where the server is orchestrated across a Kubernetes cluster, you're gonna need one common place. You're gonna need one notebook where you can work with all your data, right? And of course, with Kubeflow, you can make use of your regular Jupyter notebook, and I'm sure all the developers that we have out here have been comfortable with using Jupyter notebook. It's very simple to use, and it's one of the preferred ways of how a lot of us developers write code as well. So in that case, this actually helps in a way where you can completely concentrate on using Jupyter notebooks for writing code. And the next important component we'll have to talk about is the machine learning frameworks that we can use. See, there are four main machine learning frameworks that that act as a serving that we can kind of use to deploy all of our models through and work with it as well. You have the MXNet, you have PyTorch, you have Chainer, you have TensorFlow serving, and you have a lot of other machine learning frameworks that are supported by Kubeflow too. So this mostly is what you would require to go on to solve a problem with machine learning. And down the line, of course, whenever you're talking about machine learning, it's an ever growing field, so you can definitely expect to have more of frameworks come into the picture with Kubeflow. And with thousands of people actively contributing to the world of open source, it should come as no surprise to you that there'll be complete support of making use of all of these in the Kubernetes architecture as well. So that is something really important, and that you really should know about. So now, on the next section, we can actually talk about how machine learning works with Kubeflow. See, machine learning is done by whom, right? Who is the person who's responsible for achieving machine learning? Either data scientists, or they are either machine learning engineers, right? So these guys have the complete power to make use of powerful computers around them, and to use these computers to the best of their efficiency, to make sure that that the computer is working in an optimum way, where it's providing the maximum performance possible. Now, if you're thinking about the same scenario in a cloud computing environment or on a Kubernetes environment, that's going to take some time and skill, right? So this is actually what happens when people go on to implement Kubeflow in their existing machine learning chain. You have data scientists that will create the machine learning models for you, or of course machine learning engineers as well. And once the models are actually created, right, there is an ops team that sits in the picture, where they're going to take all the machine learning models that get created by data scientists and machine learning engineers, and then they take it into production, as we discussed before. Prototype to production. On the left you have prototype, and of course you're going to get the final production code on the left side itself. But then to take it to production, to bridge the gap that exists between development and operations, we have people to do that. And these guys are experts, and they're called as ML ops experts, because machine learning operations is what ML ops stands for. And this is very much required in a production environment too. And to check out the next set, on this tutorial, you might be wondering about what is so complex about machine learning that, even with Kubeflow, sometimes people find it difficult to use. See, there's three main things, right? See, when we talk about machine learning, first of all, you guys learning machine learning and providing a solution for a problem that's out there is going to take a bit of time. So it's not just time that it's going to take; it's going to take equal amounts of effort, because hey, let's face it honestly here. You're using a machine and you're trying to ask the machine to replicate human intelligence. Human intelligence, in a way, is probably the most intelligent thing right now. But so if you're asking a machine to do it, so even though the machine has extremely powerful computation power, probably quicker than humans, it has a lot of things that, but it doesn't have a lot of things that we do, right? That's what makes machine learning complex to achieve in the first place itself. So it's going to take a good amount of time, it's going to take a good amount of effort, and of course, at the end of the day, the result that you will see is worth the time and the effort that you put into machine learning, is what I wanted to convey. Now, when you're talking about the complexity of what goes on in a machine learning pipeline, right? See, the first step involves data collection. This is probably the place where it's going to take the most amount of time, because you need a data set, you need to pre-process the data set, you need to clean the data set, and you need to find out the problem, you need to find out the data set that solves the problem. So collecting data is one of the most important steps when we talk about machine learning. And then of course we have feature extraction. Feature extraction is when you'll keep whatever is required and throw away what's not. This feature extraction, is a place where you filter out things and you understand what's required for your model and what's not required. This is a very important step as well. And of course, I just put it out in a very simple way, but actually implementing it will take some effort. And then we have model configuration. Model configuration is where you have to understand what type of machine learning should you use to solve the problem. Once you understand that, you must have a model which will make use of the types of algorithms that you think is right for the solution. Be it supervised algorithm, unsupervised, it can be reinforced. It can be reinforcement learning and a lot more as well, right? So you need to find what model to pick and you need to configure it to at least have the bare bones of it working. And once you understand what you need, all the tools that you have, all the data that you have, and you're ready to actually put it all into code, well, yes, here is where you'll require a machine learning engineer or a data scientist to put all of these into effect by converting and typing out the code in multiple programming languages, be it R, be it Python, be it Java, or any other language that supports machine learning as well. And after that, you have something called as workflow monitoring. With workflow monitoring and process management is a way where we're talking about the operations side of machine learning. Once the code is written, once the model is working, once it's verified that yes, this is a solution to the problem, you will have to keep on monitoring it to see how it moves around through the life cycle of the problem. Can it be made better? Version control, how many people are working on the project? Is the project actually complete? Have you met all the all the requirements from the client, and a lot of other things, right? So to monitor all of this easily, the operations part of it handle all of these too. And then process management, right? See, it's not just that you're done as soon as you write the machine learning code. It's all about getting this code ready as a product or an application to the people who are willing to use it, or the people who have paid you to build it. Now, this is another very important thing that follows workflow monitoring, because there's a lot of things in each of these steps, right? See, for data collection, I can probably tell you 10 steps, and for feature extraction, another 10 more steps. So we can talk about 100 steps before we come to the process of workflow monitoring. Now, to break, manage, and make effective use and keep a track of all of these 100 steps, you're going to require a person who's going to sit and manage the life cycle of a machine learning model, right? That is where process management always takes center stage. And then coming to the talk about how Kubeflow came to the picture, even though Kubeflow has been in testing for a while now, there's a lot of beta tests available. The official version 1.0 of Kubeflow actually launched in March of 2020, right? So it wasn't very long ago, but then now there is complete support for Kubeflow. And a lot of people, a lot of companies, in fact, thousands of companies have realized the power of Kubeflow, and everyone wants to use and jump on it to see how best they can use it. One, because it really doesn't cost any money because of its open source nature, and two, if it's open source, it means that there is just thousands and thousands of enthusiasts, people, developers, and a lot of other people with interest who will be developing the product as well. Now, if I was a person who was contributing to the open source community for Kubeflow, let's say I use Kubeflow, I find that something is wrong or something can be made better. What do? I basically, fix something or suggest changes, or actually go on to roll out the changes and tell people saying, hey, this is how I've done better. Now, do that 1,000 times over with 1,000 different people. You have a product which will be polished very nicely with, I'm just giving you a random number here saying 1,000, but there'll be, of course, a lot of other number of contributors out there as well, right? So each of these guys bring about their best to develop the software, and in an open source nature, that will help a lot. And one thing is that the entire Kubeflow project that's happening right now, right, be it from its launch to every single day, the progress these guys make in the community, it can all be tracked on the official Kubeflow GitHub as well. So if you head on to that GitHub, you can check out, right from the inception to where they are now. And I think that in your journey of learning Kubeflow, you really have to understand where these guys came from, what the product was when it officially came out, where it is now, and of course where it is headed as well. So when you're talking about making use of Kubeflow, right? See, Kubeflow is one of these platforms that you can use across a wide variety of cloud computing platforms that are out there. Be it Amazon Web Services, be it GCP or the Google Cloud Platform, be it Azure, be it the Red Hat OpenShift, be it IBM Cloud, and many other clouds as well. So if you are a person who's using any one of these cloud platforms, or if your company is using it, or if you plan to doing it, understand that you can actually go on to implement Kubeflow without you having to put much effort as well. So in that particular case, if we were to show you saying, hey, this is how it works on Azure, or this is how it works on the IBM Cloud, and if you're a person who's using Amazon Web Services, it really won't make sense to you, right? I mean, of course, at the end of the day, you will find out the basics of it, but to understand it in depth, you really have to first find out what cloud platform you want to use. And after that, once you know what cloud platform you want to use, understand that Kubeflow supports everything. So with that in mind, you just start to see the official documentations to see how you can get started with Kubeflow for that particular cloud platform, and then begin working on it as well. And then the second biggest advantage we have to talk about is the TensorBoard support, right? See, we already spoke about how you guys can use TensorFlow and how well you can implement it using the Jupyter Notebook in the cloud computing platforms too. With TensorFlow comes one of these beautiful visualization tools called as TensorBoard, and TensorBoard is completely integrated into use whenever you guys are going to use Kubeflow with all the single features that it brings. So with this kind of a support for TensorBoard, what you can do is you can tune out all the model parameters, and you can work with the performance checking and analysis of your models, and tweak it, tune it based on your requirement, right? At the end of the day, it's going to save a lot of time, it's going to save a lot of effort, and if you have saved time and effort, it means you're making more money in a production environment, and it is as simple as that. It's not just saving time and money. When we talk about TensorFlow, you have to understand that this kind of a data visualization that we get, it's extremely aesthetically pleasing to use. It's completely functional in a way where if you probably see a lot of data in charts, you might not pick up a fault in the data, but then as soon as you put it out and lay it on a graph, that'll stand out to you like a sore thumb. So in that particular case, using TensorBoard is something which is very effective too. And then when we talk about model deployment, right? See, with model deployment, it is extremely important that you understand that TensorFlow it's ready to use with TensorFlow. Of course, you can use PyTorch, you can use frameworks such as scikit-learn as well. And with this case, you have to understand that depending on your model complexity, you're going to require resources, right? So in this particular case with Kubernetes, you have something called as auto scaling that happens, right? So it will go on to assign these resources automatically based on the level of level of computing power your machines need, and it's going to start scaling from maybe one machine in a cluster to 10 machines in a cluster to 100 machines in a cluster to go on to actually have the best performance possible too. And then when we have to talk about the Kubeflow serving as well, right? So this is one of these tools that will run locally and on the cloud premise as well. So it is not that you have to have a compulsory cloud setup to make use of Kubeflow. If you have a local network architecture where you'd want to use this, of course you can use that as well. So that kind of a flexibility is really one of the big advantages that comes whenever we talk about model deployment. And then with model deployment, with this kind of a ease of use, it means of course efficiency goes up again. When efficiency goes up again, you save time and money. You save time and money, you're making more money to the organization itself, right? So guys, now let's take a quick look at the GitHub, and of course take a look at the Kubeflow website as well. And now coming to the GitHub, as I told you, you can track their entire project here, right from what's happening right now, all the pipelines that they have, the manifest, the websites, their entire community and everything. So they have a huge GitHub profile where they have a huge GitHub profile where you can check out a lot of things here. So make sure at the end of the day, before you start working, or as and when you start working towards learning Kubeflow, right, understand what they're doing in a way how best you can use it, right? So you can there'll be all the top languages that they've put using. You can see JSON.NET, people are using Go, TypeScript, Python, and a lot of others as well. So if you just click on these repositories, you will see a lot of things. And of course, whenever you talk about all the dashboards that go on to use it, and all the tests that go on to see if these dashboards are functional, the updates are working or not, you can find a plethora of information on this particular website. So I would really suggest and urge that you guys check it out. And after that, coming to the actual Kubeflow website, to get a quick start, you can of course take a look at the documentation to get work with, right? It's one of the biggest machine learning toolkits out there right now. We have to work on Kubernetes. And one important thing, as I mentioned in our session, before you start working with Kubeflow, right, you need a basic understanding of Kubernetes. And of course, you're going to need something called as Customize as well. Customize is one of these configuration management tools that will give you a template free way on how you can work with the tools as well. So in that particular case, you really wouldn't require a lot of customize, but of course the knowledge on Kubernetes is definitely something that's needed. So you can see how you can go on to choose a Kubeflow deployment option as well. Do you want a single node deployment where you're going to run everything in one particular node on a cluster? You can do that. Do you want to have a cloud deployment based on all the types of clouds that we discussed? It is possible. So do you want on-premise installation? Do you not want on-premise installation? So based on all of that, right, it's going to give you a lot of flexibility to go on to get started as well. But then, as I just mentioned, to go on to use all of these on a cloud platform, guys, you really have to follow certain basic rules. And of course, it's not just rules, certain installation steps that are out there. See, for GCP, these guys have a deployment guide. For AWS, they have another one. If it's Microsoft Azure, what we call as AKS, then of course they have another one. IBM Cloud, there's another one. If we have more documentation for OpenShift as well. So to deploy all of these, what's the first step? You really have to go on to install it, right? So these guys will give you the complete steps that you need to basically get started with it. Of course, you're going to need a lot of training to use it. You're going to need a lot of head start, structured way of learning to understand first of all what this is, why it is used, all the things that we already checked out, and then actually using it, right? So in this particular scenario, depending on where you want to deploy Kubeflow, they're going to give you install instructions. They're going to tell you how you can uninstall it, how do you create a cluster, how do you use the ICRs, or what we call as the IBM Cloud Registries. There's so many different things, and of course they provide all the basic documentation to do this, and that's what makes me very happy about it. And then once you are ready to, let's say, go on to use it, now you want to make use of Kubeflow on the IBM Cloud, they're going to give you in depth about how you can first of all deploy it, and how you can install it, how you can secure it, and all of that, right? So with each of these tools, it's basically a very simple command line interface. You're going to need a command line interface where you log into the cloud, and once you log into your cloud, be it AWS, be it IBM, you just have to run a couple of commands there to make sure you can get all of your storage up, everything, and you can work with the deployment process. Well, you're going to have to build the code. You're going to have to allocate the resources, deallocate the resources whenever it's not required. You have to configure auto scaling, multi-user mode, version controlling, and all of that, right? So you have all the code, all the documentation basically that's needed to get you guys started. So if you just click on the documentation part on their website, you should have the basic understanding of how you can go on to use this on any cloud platform of your choice that these guys support as well. Now, coming back to my final thoughts about this, having a career in Kubernetes and having a career in DevOps or Kubeflow in general, it's extremely trending. It's considered to be one of the top roles for 2021 and beyond, and there's always a demand for this, right? So now that people are seeing how powerful Kubeflow is, they'll want to hire people who understand Kubeflow in and out. And if there is an increasing demand, it means the supply keeps going low. So if you guys are trained, if you guys have the capability, the skills, the knowledge to work on this, then it means that you can actually get really good salaries. You can get jobs in your dream companies to work with. It's an open source project. There'll be millions of people that are always interested in the development of the project and a lot more. So it'll keep trending all the time. And then when you're thinking about how ever growing it is, do I really have to talk about how the future of machine learning looks like? Because it's as bright can get. And considering all of that, and now with the power of distributed computing, cloud computing on the rise, and with containerization tools that everyone almost is using out there, well, you are in for a very nice roller coaster ride that's just gonna head up and up and up in the graph, right? So in that particular case, it's an ever growing domain, and of course it has amazing career prospects, amazing market value, and at the end of the day, it's really fun to work with, and you will have the satisfaction of actually solving problems too.
We hope this session was very informative for you all. If you have any questions, any feedback, or anything in general as well, make sure to head down to the comment section and do let us know. We'll be more than happy to help you out there. On that note, I hope all of you are keeping safe, keeping your learning up. I wish you well, and I'll see you on the next one.